Tell me if I'm wrong, but what I'm gathering from this conversation with you is that you believe that no matter what you do, no matter who you are or how successful you are, that people will never know who you are, or people will not care. You mentioned earlier that you think people are going to think you're a fraud, and realize that you're just an average person and there's nothing special about you. Have you heard of the term imposter syndrome? We've had similar conversations in the past, and so I'm just curious what your thoughts are. What do we say when we're having these feelings? Take all my clothes off in front of 100 people I've never met before. Almost. Not quite. Let's try it again. When we're having these negative feelings, and when you're feeling like you're not working towards a goal like you want to, or you're comparing yourselves to other people, what do you think is a good thing to say to yourself and help you feel empowered and to continue to make this journey? That's showbiz, baby! Whether or not burlesque is therapy is something that is discussed widely in the burlesque community and has been for a very, very long time. One of the main things that we tend to see with burlesque often is the form of self-expression and telling our stories and politics and really finding our voice and creating validation and community through the art of burlesque and striptease. But as performers, what is our responsibility, and how do we know when we're starting to encroach on that line a little bit of maybe relying on burlesque a little bit too much? What's the difference between telling a story or sharing a personal experience or politics and making it go too far where we become dependent on the outside validation from our audience or other community members and performers? And today we're going to be dissecting that a little bit more. Is burlesque therapy? We don't always have to go to professionals and therapists and counselors, but often it's a really good idea because they're going to have different perspectives and insights, and professionals can really pull pieces together and make connections and talk about those connected threads. Therapy is something really, really important, but still highly stigmatized today, and I think it's very important that we are able to work through our own situations and experiences, whether that's a past experience from our childhood to maybe something we're going through now, to maybe something we might be going through in the future, and we're a little bit concerned about how am I going to do this, and if in my identity maybe I need to share that, or maybe I need to share this piece of my experience to help showcase a little bit of the story that we see. And burlesque is one of those phenomenal art forms where we tend to see that. We tend to see people sharing stories and sharing politics and poking fun at a lot of it. And that's one thing that's so beautiful about burlesque, is it's where you can find community. It's where so many of us find that validation and find that authenticity, where we can really start to express ourselves or explore our identities. A lot of burlesque performers tend to have major social anxiety or be really shy. I was one of those people. I still am one of those people. But for myself, I was really able to find my own voice through burlesque. Even if I was really shy, didn't open up a whole lot personally, to really open up and be vulnerable and get to that place of connection. It was easy for me to take my clothes off, ironically. And through burlesque, it's not so much being on stage, but in addition to that, connecting with people backstage and connecting with individuals at places like BurlesqueCon or the Burlesque Hall of Fame has really helped me personally open up and start to explore a little bit more about myself. Connecting with individuals who both knew who they were and were proud of who they were and were loud about it, and other people who were just on the beginning of the journey, maybe a little bit more than I was at that time. That was just one moment at BurlesqueCon that jump started where I am today and who I am today, in many ways, more ways than one, and it's made me become more comfortable and more vocal about who I am and standing up against disparities or underrepresentation in performing arts, and really want to be active in my work and also be able to celebrate equally. And so when we talk about therapy and burlesque, or therapy and performing arts, there's not to say that it can't be therapeutic and it can't be healing and it can be a huge part of your journey. But with that said, burlesque is not therapy. I'm not a professional therapist, so some of the language I'm going to talk about a little bit is not going to be technical, but from my experience and from many other mentors I've had in the past, this is a pretty common teaching that we tend to have in burlesque, where burlesque is not therapy. To me, the difference is really that dependency. When you have something that's healing or something that is validating, something that is part of a positive change in your life or helping you put pieces together, what I think is when you have that dependency on burlesque, that I need burlesque to be valid, or I have to connect with the audience to be valid. What happens to me if I don't have burlesque to have that outlet, or if I don't have that community to connect with to help me walk through my problems, or even celebrate things that I'm going through? What happened when overnight we had no shows, and overnight we had no community? As much as people were putting in the effort to have Zoom chats and to have Zoom shows and virtual shows and connect with friends on the phone, there was still a very large portion of us who we couldn't connect, and we had to stay home. And even if I did have a Zoom conversation with somebody, you connect very differently online than you do in person. A lot of us really had trouble dealing with that and managing our own emotions and feelings and really grieving over what we lost, because we didn't know when burlesque would be back. We didn't know how it would be back, if it's changed. Many individuals who have worked for a long time really incredibly hard to create safe spaces and create diversity and representation and create healthy communities. What happens when we come back? Is that going to exist, or do we have to start from scratch? Who am I if I'm not Cherry Cheeks? So much of burlesque is phenomenal that half the time when you're on stage, everything's left behind and you're just in the moment soaking up what's going on. That's really difficult when you don't have those times or that time or space to share yourself, whether you're doing a beautiful, sexy, extravagant classic burlesque act or something a little bit more personal. What is your responsibility as a burlesque performer? And what is my responsibility as a burlesque performer? So often in burlesque, we use it as a medium to express ourselves and to share a piece of who we are. And there's a very fine line with that. I love burlesque because you get to see politics and personal stories and really, really beautiful acts in many different varieties. And to me, that line of when are you sharing something to be authentic and to bring awareness to an issue or to bring awareness to an identity, when are you doing that versus when are you using it purely for pleasure? For me, the real difference is, are you doing it again to share a story because it's something that needs to be said, or are you doing it because you have to do it to heal? As a burlesque performer, it is our responsibility to keep our audiences safe. I am completely in the mindset that there are times that are completely valid, that I wholeheartedly agree with, that the audience has to be uncomfortable and they have to think and they have to reflect and they have to have that kind of wall, or not wall, but like that message sent to them, and have them go, whoa. But when am I doing it too much purely just to make them uncomfortable? Or if it's a personal story, how can I make sure I'm actually in control of my act? That's my line. Part of that, I might even workshop and talk to other performers and see what their thoughts are on it. There's going to be lots of gaps that I'm not going to see when I want to tell a story on stage, whether I'm talking or whether I am performing. When is a time that I can be passionate on stage and I can let myself be authentic and genuine and vulnerable, but am I still in control? There's times when you might see a performer on stage and you can tell when they are still healing in that act and they're still processing while they're performing. And you can be frustrated on stage, you can be frustrated while you perform, but how can you pull yourself out of it? And as soon as you're stuck in that moment, there's certain acts that individuals will do, there's even acts that I do. I need to make sure I'm getting myself mentally prepared in that headspace before I go on stage. I go on stage and then I have to make sure I'm decompressing off stage after I perform my act. Where if it takes me the entire night to process that, then that is an act that I might need to sit on for a little bit longer and process what that story is a little bit more. Because as an audience member, you can see that the audience is incredibly receptive. They can usually tell when there's somebody telling a story in control and when someone's stuck in that headspace while telling that story. And we don't want to make our audience feel uncomfortable in the sense that as an audience member, I don't want to feel like I have to step on stage and save you. And that can be a real challenge because so many of our stories in burlesque are so personal to us in many different ways, but especially when we get to those vulnerable stories. We don't want the audience to feel like they have to protect us or like we are feeling weakened. We want to still feel empowered to tell our stories and empowered to give ourselves permission to be vulnerable, not because we feel we have to, but because we want to. There's many different stories and conversations that you will probably see in burlesque as you continue through it. And I really don't want this video to be invalidating for anybody. I know there's a lot of stories that do really need to be told. You don't necessarily have to be healed from a situation or an experience in order to tell your story. Even if you're never going to heal from a situation, being able to process that in a healthy way. Again, when you have therapists or even counselors or even your friends and community members, there's a huge level of consent with that. When you leave it all on stage in front of an audience, the audience doesn't always have notice for that consent. And even though many producers are really good at talking about things like giving trigger warnings before an act or maybe even promotion, say that you might see some heavy topics in this show, it's not always guaranteed. Different forms of trauma or different experiences are going to impact different individuals differently. Burlesque is so important because it is one of those communities where it's a community where we often come together to gather, to thrive, to build relationships, to validate one another, and to really create that space and foster these healthy conversations, or even again fostering space on that stage for these beautiful stories to be told and have that energy exchanged between the audience and the performer. I know this is a little bit more of a candid video, but this is a really important topic in burlesque, and especially for me, I think it's really important as part of my responsibility with sharing videos and educating individuals on burlesque. That also goes with educating individuals on our own responsibilities when it comes to performing and what we present and how we care for ourselves. One of the biggest pieces of advice I've ever been told is to push yourself but not break yourself. That is something that I hold very dear to my heart. I want to be able to again come out of that headspace and not feel like I'm putting myself out for a day or a week after I perform every time. With that, I really hope this video gave a little bit of insight and a little bit of information for you to think and consciously be aware of what you're presenting and bringing to the audience and the shows and your performance. I'm really curious if you are watching this video. Do you agree? I would love to see any thoughts you have, any questions, comments, leave them down below. And otherwise, I will see you next time. Bye.